Hey Internet, what's going on? I'm Ricardo, the Cynical Critic. Welcome to my video on my final thoughts of the first volume of RWBY. Now, a few things before we get started. First and foremost, I want to just thank you so much, guys, for watching my videos. I know I've been saying it a lot right now, and it technically should go without saying, but honestly, thank you. I am very grateful to have you guys. The second thing is I technically have a confession to make, and that is, yeah, I kind of knew about RWBY way before I even started thinking about making reviews. What? I know, it's like, you knew about RWBY? Then why'd you hate on it so much? Well, first of all, I am a critic, so I have to criticize it. And as a reviewer, I have to take both the good and the bad in equal terms. But yeah, I knew about Rooster Teeth since like their second season of Red vs. Blue. So when RWBY was announced, I knew about it right away. And yes, the moment the Red trailer was released, I watched it right away. But whether or not I like a show shouldn't matter when it comes to judging that show, because at the end of the day, it has to stand up on its own. And RWBY kind of has done that. I mean, it's not great, but it's really good. And in this video, I'm going to explain what I truly liked about it and why I thought could have used more work. Right off the bat, guys, this is my personal opinion. Not that my reviews weren't already of a sort of a personal opinion, because, well, technically every review is of a sort of bias one way or another. But here, there is no like reviewers, so hat off. This is what I truly thought about RWBY Volume 1. Now, of course, let's start with the bad things, the things that I thought could have used a bit more work, so that we can end this video on a positive note. And the one thing I thought could have used more work was the length of the videos. You know, I complained about this a lot in the very beginning of my reviews, but honestly, it should go without saying the fact that I think a lot of people we're a little down on the length of the videos. I mean, usually a show like this should last about like 20 minutes, maybe 18 if they, they can't really bump it up enough. But for the most part, a lot of these videos, even the ones that were split in half and you combine them, were about like 10 to 15 minutes long. And yes, I actually know why that is. It is because of the fact that they did have a lot of constraints when making the videos. I mean, let's face the facts. This was a roll of the dice. They had to take a bit of a gamble here because Rooster Teeth isn't a big-ass company that can just shell out millions of dollars on a project that may not work. Not that a production company wouldn't shell out millions of dollars on a show that may or may not work, just that they have done that. Anyways, Rooster Teeth really couldn't do that, and so they kind of just did this as sort of a congratulations, Monty. Thank you so much for what you did during the Red vs. Blue series. So they gave them some time, a bit of a budget, and, a crew to shell out the first season. And that's not to say what we got wasn't pretty cool. Sadly, it's just a lot of us wish that we could have gotten more of it. And I know that's technically something you would say about almost any show. I wish I could have had more, but here it was blatantly obvious that the episodes were short. Yes, on one hand, like I said, this could have been done because of the constraints they had. But on the other hand, I think they were kind of stuck on their original Red vs. Blue way. When Red vs. Blue was first coming out and they just released like 2-minute episodes and we were fine with that. Because let's face it, it was a comedy. 2 minutes is fine for a good joke because that's how long you'll be laughing and then you move on to the next one. However, here, I'm pretty sure they wanted to have a story. And while I'm pretty sure they did all they could in order to give us a decent amount so that we weren't left like in the dust wondering what the hell is going on, I'm pretty sure they could have done a bit more. Now, the reason why I say that the shortness of the videos was the first thing I didn't really like, because it affects so many other things that I actually didn't like about the video. One being the fact that there wasn't really much of a plot. Yes, one could argue that technically the two teams becoming teams was sort of a plot, but it's just a plot that we should expect. We weren't knowing what the main story was. Why were the villains here? What were they doing? And what was that whole thing about getting so much dust? And what were the White Fang doing there anyways? Anyways, in the show, there was only like technically 3 points in which I could figure that the plot actually progressed. The first was at the very start of episode 1, and then the second two were at the very end, and during episode 15 and 16, and even then, they still focused more on the characters than they tried on building up a story. Now, I don't know if that was because Monty didn't really know how to write a story, or maybe Miles, or Carrie, or, nobody there knew how to write a story, or they were just having conflicting ideas, or maybe they just didn't know if this was going to be worth it, so they didn't want to put too much on us, and then have us disappointed. But as the saying goes, go big or go home, and they should have gone big and tried to give us a decent story, or at least put out little clues here and there that we could have gone back and said, hey, listen, look, here are these little things that we weren't really sure if they meant anything at the time, but now they mean lots of things. But sadly, it was not to be, and we got a decent plot. I mean, we know the villains are there, we know they're doing something, but that was about it. And speaking about the villains, that was another thing that suffered. In any show, the thing that a villain has to have above everything else, above them being powerful, above them being scary, above us knowing who they are, is presence. Think about all the greatest villains that we've had in popular culture. I'm just going to name up 4 right off the bat. First of all, let's think about Sauron from the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Guy had presence. No matter where you went in the story, everyone seemed to know who he is. Everyone was afraid of him. And speaking of afraid, Voldemort from the Harry Potter series. Everyone was so afraid of this guy that they feared saying his name. Talk about presence. I mean, my man Voldemort had more presence than the President of the United States had presence on Twitter. Another great villain that you guys will probably know if you are into anime, and considering the fact that you're watching this, you're likely into anime, is Father from Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood. This dude was able to hold himself as a god, even though he was clearly not a god. Even when he became a god, he was clearly not a god. But the way he was able to hold himself among no matter who walked into the room clearly stated that this dude was a man to reckon with. And the final one is from another anime, the Fire Lord from the Avatar Last Airbender. Shut the hell up! This is an anime, okay? I mean, if Teen Titans can be considered an anime, then this definitely can be considered an anime. I mean, just look how popular it is. Don't you want that part of his anime community? Regardless, that's for another video. Anyways, this dude knew how to have himself present. We knew nothing about him. We only knew little speckles here and there, and we didn't even see him until the very last season. And yet, we knew this was a guy you do not screw with. Sadly, with RWBY, I can't say that about any of the villains. Not even Roman. And that's not to say that Roman wasn't good. I mean, the guy was amazing. That's one of the reasons why they kept him around, even though he was supposed to just be for Volume 1. No joke, they created a single-off villain just to have him for Volume 1, and he got to stick around because he was awesome. Sadly, awesome doesn't mean intimidating. And Roman felt to me more like he was just a con man. Yes, he was able to worm his way out of any situation, but he wasn't really threatening. I mean, the one who's supposed to be intimidating is Cinder. Oh. She was in the beginning and at the very end. She was the woman that walked in with the 2 goons.
What?
She's voiced by Jessica Nigri.
Who the fuck's that?
The boob lady! Oh, yeah, her. Yeah, I know lots about her.
Yes, her. Though, sadly, we don't really get her right now. Later on, we find out that she's technically supposed to be one of the main villains, and yet we feel nothing about her. We're not sure we're supposed to be scared or excited or, apprehensive about her or anything. We just know that she's there, and she's got an interesting fashion sense, but that's about it. And speaking about our characters, that was another thing that suffered due to the fact that these episodes were so short. And it's not the fact that they weren't interesting. Hey, my God, they are pretty interesting. Rooster Teeth knows how to make itself some characters. No, it's the fact that there were too many of them. What? There were too many characters? Bitch, what are you talking about? Yes, even though it sounds a bit weird, I felt that there were too many characters. Not the fact that there were just too many characters. It was the fact that there was too many characters and not enough time to properly develop them all. And that's not to say that some didn't get development, and that's not to say that some didn't need development. I mean, 3 right off the bat that didn't need development at all, Yang nor Red. I mean, they were pretty much set as is. We didn't really need to know anything about the backstories, but, they didn't have no presence at all. They were there, and we clearly saw them, and we clearly loved them, but, it's fine if we don't get too much about them. However, the other ones clearly played an important part, and we didn't get enough development with them. Yes, we got a decent amount of development with Blake and Weiss. However, as I said with my final review, we could have used a bit more about Blake. I mean, we literally jump into the fact that she's part of the right thing, and we know very little about her. We also know very little about Ruby and Weiss, who are also very important. I mean, we get some information about them, but it's sadly not enough. Characters needed to be developed more, and sadly they weren't. That's not to say that they were not developed at all, because they clearly were, but they needed to be developed more. And, well, with such short time constraints, there just wasn't enough time for that. Now, of course, despite the fact that I've been bitching so far, it's not to say that RWBY wasn't good. I mean, it was a good show. Just think of how far and fast it's grown. So there were clearly things that people liked about it, and what I loved about it was the animation. I know a lot of you idiots out there are going to complain about the animation and say that it wasn't that as good, but let's face the facts. I highly doubt any of you come even close to what Rooster Teeth was able to do. Let's face it, the animation was good. I mean, it's not great, but it was good enough. And the way they were able to bring that about, both through character movement, through the action, and probably most importantly, to the voice acting, was fantastic. How does voice acting really come into play with animation? Simple. We could have had the voices not match up with mouth movements. Or the characters could have been talking normally, but moving around weirdly, because, you know, that's how animators think that you need to do. You have to have movements, especially with the arms for some damn reason. I just completely humiliated myself and posted it to the internet, didn't I?
Yeah, but you do that with all your videos.
That's right, thank you! Anyways, the animation was really amazing, and let's face the facts. While it does get better later on, at the moment, with what they were able to do, it was pretty damn cool. I mean, we've seen cel-shaded art style before. I mean, just look at Borderlands or The Walking Dead. But here was blended really nicely between this usual 3D animation of giving us very realistic textures to that of cartoons. It was simple enough so that we could immediately become attached to whatever we were looking at. I mean, just look at certain mangas or anime. The way they're drawn is pretty damn simple, but it's so visually pleasing. But it was also complex in certain areas. Just look at the environments. The environments are pretty damn spectacular, which is another thing I loved about RWBY. It gave a sense that this felt more like an open world than just a series of places that we visited. Just thinking back to Chapter 8 where they go fight those two Grimm in that dilapidated ruins, I just gotta say, that's a great way of giving us visual information that there is history to this place. I mean, where did those ruins come from? I mean, we don't really know and we don't really need to know, but it's pretty interesting to think just what could have been there before everything else. Another interesting is the creatures, more specifically the Grimm. I'm pretty sure the Brothers Grimms would be proud to know that their name is represented with a monster that wants to kill all of humanity. I mean, just think of most of the stories they've written. They're pretty fucked up. And so are the Grimm! Despite the fact that they're not going very complex in the design, how they were able to represent some of the Grimm were pretty damn neat. Sort of a mix between fantasy and, well, Japanese art style. The masks these Grimm wear and the way they seem to be made almost out of shadows, representative of creatures that we already know of, is pretty visually awesome. But I like it how they make the fact that the Grimm should be feared, but we are capable of fighting them off. Now, another thing I really loved about this show was the feel of this volume. In usual shows, we get the feel that our characters have to build up to bigger and better things so that they can take on the big baddie. Or like we get in a high school, it's usually just a bunch of romance and everything. But here it was sort of neither. Granted, they're not really in high school, they're more in college, but still. However, instead of the romance or fighting against the enemy, it was just these guys learning to work together and learning to become a team. We see that throughout the volume. At the very beginning, it's clear, RWBY can't fight this alone. Later, see that RWBY has to not only learn to become a better teammate, but has to learn to take her role as leader a hell of a lot more seriously. And then we see what happens when two teammates butt heads against each other. And I really said all I need to say about that incident during the final review, but I'll just say one more thing. It's very interesting that here, it's still about RWBY. And that is that RWBY had to learn to allow her teammates to work things out. It's clear that she wanted to jump in, and when she did jump in, things didn't really, work out all that much. But at the end of the day, she knew that she had to let her teammates work this out. And again, I pretty much said all I need to say on that, so let's move on to the next thing that I really loved about RWBY, and that is the character development. Yes, while they didn't really focus on the story, they did seem to put that effort towards something, and I'm glad it wasn't just making the visuals all spectacular or making the action scenes really jam-packed with explosions and everything. Instead, they focused on the characters and trying to develop them in what little time they had. I mean, in just this one volume, we get like 5 instances in which we get some serious character development that is just memorable. The first, of course, is with Jean and Pierre, which Jean is being helped by Pierre to activate his semblance, something that we still don't know what the fuck is. And if any of you want to put down some theories in the comment section on what Jean's semblance is, fuck you! Next, of course, is we see between RWBY and Weiss, the argument that they have, and then, of course, the resolution that we come to that I think everyone can agree was spectacular. And of course the other one is with Jean and Pierre's relationship, taking another step forward that we wish Jean would pay attention to. And then of course there was the black and white incident in which people learned that we need to be more accepting about other people, despite the fact that they look different from us. We're all the same. Oh, and yeah, there was also that thing between Weiss and Blake that could have used a bit more time, but of course, yeah, my first complaint about this show. But my last compliment would have to be the characters. Yes, I've been hammering this a lot, but seriously, Rooster Teeth is really good at creating believable characters. Yes, they're not exactly the greatest ones written, and they could use a bit more complexity, but in all honesty, that doesn't matter. They still are really interesting. I don't think there was a single character in which I could say that I hate it. And yes, I'm making a top and bottom 5 character list, and yes, I'm going to be releasing it on Thursday, and yes, you guys are going to be pissed about it. But the characters here are pretty awesome. I mean, despite the fact that they didn't all get enough development, it was still pretty awesome to see them interact with each other. And I'll say this, to anyone who hasn't watched RWBY yet, this is probably the greatest thing the show brings to you, because it only gets better. Yes, character interactions and characters themselves get better over time. And now I technically can go all day talking about these characters, just talking about each one, what were their pros, what were their cons, what was amazing about them, what could have been developed a bit more, but let's just leave it at this. RWBY, the show, is first and foremost about characters. Getting your mind right about that, you're going to find out quickly that you're going to enjoy the show a whole lot more if you realize it is mainly about the characters and what they're having to go through. Not so much as that they're going through an epic adventure, but what they have to go through and what they have to live through, and yet them finding the strength to press on. Which that last part, it pretty much sums up Red versus Blue. So yeah, while RWBY wasn't exactly great, I'll say this for Volume 1. It definitely got a lot of people interested in watching the show, which technically makes it a success. The first season's main job is setting things up so that people want to see more. And that's definitely been achieved here with RWBY Volume 1. Will Volume 2 be able to continue that? Or will it just sadly, go flatline like a lot of animes? Yes, while technically I already know, we'll find out with my reviews later on. Now tomorrow I'm going to be releasing another video, which will be my comment review, where I just take a look at a lot of your comments that you guys have posted, answer those that I thought needed to be answered, take note of those that made a good point, and of course just generally riffing all of them. Until then, I'm Ricardo the Cinema Critic. With me, no movie sacred, no video safe, but all deserve a chance. And I gotta say, I'm glad I gave RWBY Volume 1 a chance because I'm looking forward to Volume 2. Catch you guys later.